Well, hello, Andrew here again, and this is episode 95, and we're continuing in that first little bit of Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 to 4. And we'll read the words of Jesus again. Yesterday we looked at verse 1, and today we're going to carry on through into verses 2 to 4. Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So, whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Now, I find it difficult to imagine that Jesus is actually to be taken literally in what he says here. I suspect a figure of speech is involved. We seriously expect someone to sound a trumpet before we walk into a synagogue or into the temple to know that the great benefactor has arrived? I think it's unlikely. Yet, he's pointing to something. We all use figures of speech all the time. And my hunch is that this is more about the deep desire that we have within us to be well thought of. Public displays of generosity invokes power to the giver. And this is the thing that I want to talk about today. We all want to be well thought of, but when it crosses beyond that into the exercise of power, we have a whole new set of issues. Patronage, the whole thing of a benefactor, always involves power, where some person gives to another and the other knows themselves to be the recipients of the largesse, of the kindness, of the generosity of the other. Nearly always has a sense of patronage about it, always has a sense of a shift in the power relationship, that the person who's the receiver isn't under some obligation to the giver. Unless the gift is completely anonymous, with no way of the receiver being able to trace the giver, there is pretty well always power involved. It can be from a sense of gratitude, that's at the sort of one end, to a sense of ownership, of being owned, of obligation. It's a whole range of places where this can go. Ancient Rome had the obsequium laws. Just listen to that word. Where people were expected to be grateful to the emperor for the mouldy crust of bread that they had to eat. And they were required to express their appreciation volubly. And the consequences of not doing so when called upon were not pleasant. So you heard that word, the obsequium laws, from which we get our word obsequious, which in our day points to a fawning, over-the-top expression of gratitude. I can't help it, I've got to refer again to the White House, because again we see so much of this in display and in play in the current White House, where it's been the role of each of the President's cabinet secretaries at the start of a meeting to tell him how amazing he is and how privileged they are to work for him. Now, if you don't believe me, it's all there on YouTube, right near the beginning of his presidency. I don't know if it's still happening. I kind of think that for many it's wearing a bit thin, but there's always a new group of toadies ready to step up to the plate. Or so it would seem. The President in this case has made it very clear that those who are around him are only there by his favour. He has no loyalty to them. He's willing to dispense with them as quickly as they were appointed. If they displease him, if they don't show the requisite loyalty or gratitude, they're gone. The whole point here is that gifts carry power. Gifts publicly given can carry a sense of obligation on the part of the receiver. No matter what Weasley words are spoken in denial of that, everyone knows the rules. We all know the code and what is ultimately expected of us. It operates according to the golden rule. Now, this is not the golden rule that you think it is. The golden rule that I'm talking about is the one that says, the one who has the gold makes the rules. That's the golden rule. In my current situation as a church pastor, I have no idea what people give. I do not know which of my parishioners are generous and which ones are miserly. And this is the way that it should be. It means I treat them all the same, well, at least in theory. I'm as concerned about one as I am about the other. The concept of the power of the gift invites some reflection and some circumspection. How often is my giving done with an ulterior motive? Now, I imagine that for some this could be really quite uncomfortable. You may never have thought of this before, but it is worth reflecting on. Am I more than just wanting to buy approval? And am I wanting that? How much of it is wanting to buy influence or to invoke a sense of obligation in the recipient and the beneficiary? How much of it is wanting to bend those who benefit to my will, to my agenda, to my plan? After all, I know what's best and I have the resources to back it up. It's important to recognize that the power that such gifts have, that gifts which are not totally anonymous all have power, the power of the gift. It's important to recognize that when we make such gifts, no matter how noble sounding our words, it's hard to deny that there is an element of transaction, of purchase involved, that at one level the beneficiary, the recipient, has been bought and paid for. And at the very least, they should be grateful. And they need to remember that if there is more to come, they need to treat us, the benefactor, with the honour that is our due. The power in the relationship has been skewed in favour of the giver, the benefactor. And the recipient is aware of that. The recipient picks up the subtle and sometimes not so subtle messages. The recipient knows that in future, that in order to keep receiving largesse from the benefactor, they've got to play the game. We all have different reasons for being generous. If it's truly selfless, we need to consider the option of anonymity. And this is what Jesus, I believe, is pointing to when he suggests that our left hand should not know what the right hand is doing. I don't think he is he's being accidental when he attributes the initiative to the right hand. Right-handedness had power. We don't need to think that far back when we recognise that left-handedness was always regarded as weaker. That children at school were forced to write with their right hands. It was the right hand that implied power. And for the gift from the right hand, the one that had power to give the gift and to be seen to giving it, when it retreats to anonymity, whereas even the left hand doesn't know what it's doing, implies a surrender of that power. Jesus made no mistakes here. It wasn't accidental. And he's inviting us too to consider how it is that we give. The real heart of generosity with which we give. and how it might be measured by our willingness or otherwise for us to lay down the power of the gift and be totally anonymous. Anyway, I just offer it to you as a thought for today. God bless you.